Well, Joe, welcome to the podcast, my friend. How you doing?
Great. I'm great today. How are you, Keith?
I'm doing fantastic. Looking forward to talking to you.
And I'm looking forward to talking.
I love talking about or companies or organizations, especially dysfunctional ones. I've served in many of them. So
I think we all have.
I'm hoping you're going to tell me how not to do that again.
Yeah. In some ways, my book is an anti-manual of what not to do.
All right. Well, we're going to get into that. But to get to know you a little bit better for the audience, give me the best piece of advice you've ever received.
The best piece of advice I've ever received is that in terms of the work world, you should always be loyal to your skill set and keep training, and don't be dependent on the company, because the company doesn't depend or need you many times and will toss you out the door at any moment. I always say that the corporate angel of death could strike at any moment, and today could always be your last. So you should always be prepared. You should always be networking. You should always be out there and ready to move on. And you should so what that means is just make sure you're always sharpening your skills, training yourself, and always being the best you can in what you do. That's probably the best piece of advice.
Love that. Somebody once told me complacency kills. So
and I see a lot of people, they just get too comfortable in the job, and then all of a sudden the shock hits. As I say in the book, everybody kind of has like an expiration date. I think HR keeps little secret files, kind of like a piece of groceries like bread or milk, where it has an expiration date on there. HR says, we got an expiration date for that guy Dubin. He's going to be out the door on that day. He doesn't know it, but we know it. So, but seriously, you should always think that way.
I love that. That's so good. I'm always curious. You've had a level of success in your life. I'm curious, as you think about your journey, who are some people along the way who served as role models for you, maybe mentors? Kind of tell us what about them made them role models, and give them a shout out if you want to talk about who name them.
Sure. My closest childhood friend, his name is Peter. We're about the same age, actually. He's 1 or 2 years younger than me, and I always say I've known him since before he was born. And we've kind of followed a similar path. We were briefly in a business together, and then he moved on to another business when that business, fell apart, actually. And he's had a lot of wisdom in terms of building businesses, people relationships. We're both from a similar ethnic background, so we have a lot in common. And I tell him I don't need therapy. He's my therapist. We talk every week, and we kind of bounce things off of each other. Then there's been a few at the last company I was at, which I would call not a dysfunctional company. It was called Coal Fire Systems, and it was a very good IT security company. So I'm giving a shameless plug for that company. It was a very well run company. I thought that my managers and the executives there were very much in touch. They weren't like in my book. They were people that communicated, they listened, they took advantage of people's skills, and they promoted people, and they helped people. And I just kind of learned a lot about, you don't have to be, this hard driving jerk to succeed. And that's, those are my key mentors and guides along the way. And of course, my father, was always my father who's now deceased. He was a very funny guy. I think that's where I get my sense of humor. And he also, when I look back at his experiences in the companies he worked at, he worked for several dysfunctional companies, as an accountant. And he just kind of just had his nose down to the grindstone and did his job, and just kind of ignored the politics swirling around him sometimes. He's very good at that. He sometimes didn't know how to play the game, but he got the job done, and he was well respected, and that's important.
I love that. Being in cybersecurity, I always think cybersecurity is not really necessary. If you just have a really good password, like password 101, you're probably safe, right?
No way, man. No way. So hackers have all of the passwords. They have thousands of different password combinations that everybody thinks it's their cool password, that's going to protect them. It's not that hard to steal passwords. It's not that hard to break into systems. I would recommend using two-factor authentication. Now you can add, like, where they send an SMS message to your phone. There's password managers like LastPass and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, passwords definitely not. Well, they're not disappearing. Everybody, I think that the death of the password is premature. People always talk about how they're going to disappear. They're not, but I think they'll always be used in combination with other things. And there's ways to create strong, clever passwords that no one can guess.
I like that. I just had to throw it out there because I thought cybersecurity, we're all thinking we're safe. So,
Yeah, we're not.
yeah,
Yeah, we're not. So always think before you post. Think
right.
before you put things online. Think. I would, for instance, as I was writing this book, I was very careful where I put it, online, because I didn't want it taken or stolen before it was out there published and copyrighted. So I was very
Wow.
careful where I put it.
Yeah. You got to think about those things now, don't you?
Yeah, a lot.
So, Joe, tell us about your personal journey. We just kind of touched on a little bit about your background in the opening, but I want to kind of let you tell us how you got, because to write a book about dysfunctional companies, you had to have had a journey of dysfunction. So, so tell us about your story.
Yeah. Ask my psychiatrist; he would know about all of my dysfunctions. Um, basically, basically, what I started. Well, the book is predominantly about my couple of decades, about 25 years where I was in cyber security. But prior to that, I was in another industry. It was the a very different industry altogether. It was the international shipping and import export business. So I did a lot of international business for about 10 years before that. That was right out of business school. And interestingly enough, that was a very chaotic business. There was very little loyalty. I was kind of bounced around a lot from companies because, as soon as companies would lose business, they just lay off people en masse, and that's kind of where I first saw it. But not until I actually got into more corporate world, more structured companies, did I see, the bureaucratic, bureaucracies, fief building, people just kind of getting into all kinds of political infighting. At least, in that import export business is very entrepreneurial, very sales driven. So it wasn't as hierarchical. There were very thin layers of management. But in cybersecurity, both the companies I worked for and companies that I reviewed, because I reviewed companies of all kinds of industries and even nonprofit private things like universities and nonprofit institutions. I just saw these same patterns over and over and over again of dysfunctionality. And that's kind of what inspired me to put this book together, because it's kind of like, at one company I kind of threw these ideas on a whiteboard as I was working, and they stuck for decades. It seems this companies seem to go through the same rut over and over and over. Dysfunctional companies, that is, or companies that are not self-aware. So that that's kind of my personal story. Is that then I reached a point. I'm much older, and I was able to retire, and so I retired, and then I started. These are my memoirs, kind of my kind of therapy for me of getting it all out, of everything it had, the expose, the kiss and tell, if you will, of what went on in the corporate world.
So I looked at your book and I love the approach that you have. And it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Dysfunctional Companies.
Yeah.
So we know what led you to write the book. Tell us what you hope the person who picks up this book and reads it, what do you hope they get out of it?
So there's two things I hope they get out of it. One is comic relief, because I think a lot of people are unhappy in their job. Most people are, and they're always kind of struggling to get their work done, get things out the door, or deal with all kinds of personality issues in companies which relate to the politics. So a little bit of comic relief helps you laugh at yourself and laugh at your situation, and maybe say, "Well, it's not the end of the world," But on a serious note, it's not a prescriptive book that tells you exactly what to do. But as I said in the beginning, it's an anti-manual of what not to do in business. So it's kind of a cry for, a call for, leave the ego at the door, learn to improve your people skills, learn to communicate, break down barriers. I mean, too often I saw in companies, particularly large companies, where the executives, I like to say, they're in underground bunkers off site where you never see them, or when they come out, I have a story in there where, especially in a very large company where the CEO will come out. They have like a town hall. My gosh, there's no hall in this town, and they'll come out, and then they'll be flanked with all these advisors. It's like when the president speaks and the Secret Service comes or something like that, you know. And then they just talk all this gobbledygook and nonsense. It's kind of like singing an aria on the deck of the Titanic or something. You're wondering, does this guy work for the same company? Does this guy know what the hell I have to go through? you know. And then I mentioned there's someone people ask questions, and you think the questions are prepared canned questions that make the guy or gal look good. But then I say, well, someone asks an uncomfortable question, then two security people come and lift the offender up from each arm and take him and drag him out to the parking lot. So, and then afterwards, the the executive leaves, and then his or her entourage leaves, and it's like boom, they're gone. They're back in outer space. So breaking down barriers, that's a big thing. So um, I also, a lot of things also relate to automation. I talk about customer service nightmares. We all have gone through this where you can't get to a human being anymore. So like I have my habit 5 that human contact with customers is prohibited. And any customer service person caught talking to a customer will be disciplined. You know, so those kinds of things. Yeah, uh, breaking da- breaking down the ego, leaving it at the door, communication. Breaking down barriers. Yeah, and just being open and honest and vulnerable. I mean, it's too much of chest beating in some of these companies. Or just what the hell did he say? This gobbledygook. You know, I have a whole thing in there about I call it corporate speak. You know, it's just all these crazy things. FTE. What the hell is an FTE? FTE is some term which means that it just say it's an employee. I need employees. I need FTE to actualize the project. I just need people to get the work done. Just say it.
Right.
You
So
know.
you have 7 habits in here. One of my
Yeah.
favorites is the one about habit number 4, because I hate meetings. Most, mo- I always said that meetings to me are like a brain drain on my day. Oftentimes,
Okay. You do have to have some meeting. There's no way around it, and some meetings are necessary. But I kind of took it to the extreme. I mean, I saw people that literally never got out of their desk. They were constantly in meetings all day, every day. And I said, you should have your headphones surgically attached to your head. It would just make it a lot easier. You know.
right.
Now, particularly in my field, I often had, because I was reviewing clients, I'd need stretches of hours in the day, for example, to do, interviews of IT staff or to do testing and that kind of a thing. And then I'd have that nagging thorn in my side, that weekly meeting that they had to have, even if there was no progress. And I'd have to break up the day to have this meeting, and there was no progress, and they ended up talking about their pets and their kids and their vacations. I thought, just cancel the meeting. Why do we have to have the meeting? I mean, in another situation, I wanted to add a column to a spreadsheet. It could have been discussed in an email. No, we need a meeting. We need approval for that. I thought, oh my God, what the hell? I mean, just yes, Keith, I know meetings, man. And I have a whole thing in there about meeting police. These guys that have armbands in the hall, and if they see someone in the hall not in a meeting, they will arrest them and drag them to a meeting, even if it's a meeting not related to the job that they're in. So, so there's
Oh my word.
they have their whole culture, and
So for those who
it's
haven't
all in the
picked up your
book.
book yet, tell us run us through the 7 habits so people can
Okay.
kind of get a sense of what the 7 are.
So the first one is, if it makes sense, don't do it. So this is kind of the base habit that you must master first if you want to screw up your company before you can do all the other habits. It's just common sense things. It's about how always got to have a meeting. You always have to have a committee. You got to have the committees that begat other committees, to get anything done. And then, let's say I give several examples where I take it from the basic. If you need office supplies, it's easier to go out the door and go down to, Office Depot and buy your office supplies and go through purchasing in your own company, because there's too much paperwork and stuff like that. And then just dumb things. You see companies do things that the public wants, their customers want, and they do the opposite. There's a store in a mall that's a popular store, and then some idiot in some corporate office ran some numbers and said, it doesn't work. And then they close the store, and everybody, why are they losing business? Because it's a popular place, right? Or I have an example where, they'll move the office to where the corporate executives live, far away from the employees. I saw that once. So that was, that was kind of crazy. So then the second habit is, turf battles are part of our culture, and I say that the dysfunctional company is at war with itself. You can't really have peace and calm, in the company, because you have basically people, they're not interested in business. They're like little Napoleons, little knights, always trying to build their own little empires in the company. You ask them what's the business we're in. Well, I don't know. I need more staff. I need more FTEs. I got to build my little castle and moat, right? And then on top of the bureaucracy, I talk about silos. Where these vertical organizations that just don't communicate each other. You've got to break down the silos. Now, of course, the pyramid, which is the basic function of the bureaucratic enterprise, as it goes narrower up, there's fewer and fewer opportunities for advancement, and you get sharp elbows there, trying to fight each other off to kind of, try to get ahead. So it kind of that encourages jerky behavior, because people are always trying to fight each other to get ahead. I always say that you should always look for the person that has a rear view mirror on their shoulder, because they're looking to see who's stabbing them, and then in the back. And then the next habit 3, I talk about communication. And here there's a whole raft of things, from just gobbledygook communication to just excessive emails and constantly bombarded. And I say one sign of a dysfunctional company is you see employees walking around with neck braces because they got whiplash from moving their head around. What they say today? What do they say tomorrow? There's no consistent communication, And then I talk about, of course, the next level up from email, is, after you're bombarded with email, you've got to have a meeting, right? And we've already talked about meetings, right? So then you have the meeting. So I say, if you are not in a meeting, you'll be assigned to one. So I talk about this whole meeting culture in the book. And then the next habit again is about customer service, right? So I talk about, as I mentioned, automated customer service, because we're all used to this now, and how it's vitally important that you not talk to customers. You do whatever you can to drive customers away. You got to remember, Keith, that the twin enemies of the dysfunctional company are its employees and its customers, right? So
Right.
customers are out of sight, out of mind. They're outside the company. You can ignore them, screw them, screw the customers, right? But employees, which is in the next habit where I say drive out your best employees and ignore the rest. Employees are they're like a toothache in the company. You have to deal with them. That's the longest chapter of the book, and that's probably the most significant habit. It's just poor treatment of employees. I talk about how we have HR practices, how to ensure using automated systems that you will never hire the right employees. I give some really idiotic interview questions that you should ask. And you should ignore in background checks criminal records. So salespeople that have been convicted of crimes. Yeah, you want that. You want absolute unethical liars that'll be able to sell your product. Why not, right?
Right.
So all these things about employees, and then lastly, the last tab is about the company not serving the common good. And here I kind of talk about where companies say one thing to the public and then do something else. So they may talk about being green and environmentally friendly, and you go, gee, you have these plants that are spewing all this garbage, or you have all these emissions, these kinds of things. Company not serving the common good. And then I have this whole program in there where I call it the Asshole Management Development Training Program. And in line with poor communication, where you should strive to speak only in acronyms. I call it AMDTEP for short. I talk about all these various toxic personality types that you find, particularly in dysfunctional companies, and then how they just serve the public, is that once they leave the company, they're unleashed to go out into the world with all of the toxic skills they learned to go either to another company or gasp, they might go into government where they could cause real damage. So those are the 7 habits kind of in a nutshell, Keith.
Wow, those are interesting. And it's like a book that people can take and, like you said, see maybe their company in the book, hopefully not, but, or at least a company they've worked for.
Yeah,
Uh, but I think even if you don't intend to give practical, here's how you fix it thing, you can at
right.
least recognize if these things are present in your company or your organization, you might want to address them.
I want to address them, or yeah, in a worst case scenario, you move on. The one thing I always say, because I went to business school, I have an MBA, I call it a Master's of Bureaucratic Administration, actually. The one thing they do, and I learned a lot of good stuff. So, I make fun of it, but there are a lot of good things you do learn in a business program. And you also learn about skills, that you might not be, good at. I was more of a marketing guy than a finance guy. So I learned, the basis of finance and how to read balance sheets and stuff like that. You know, the big thing that they don't teach in business school, they don't really teach psychology. They should have a course about psychology so you can understand the different types of personality types. They do have organizational behavior where they talk about organizational structures, and things that go on in companies. And that's a very good course and a good way to approach it. But I think you need to go down in a more granular level and learn more about things that motivate people a little bit. Why do some people manipulate? How to avoid that type of thing? How to identify people that have egos bigger than Mount Everest and how to deal with that. So,
Right.
yeah,
That's good. So, Joe, I'm curious, how has your book been received?
it's been very well received among people that work in offices. So, but the other day, interestingly enough, I have a friend who's a retired executive from a major Fortune 500 company. Just one of those coincidences happened to know him, and I was kind of biting my fingernails, when I gave it to him, and I said, he liked it. He thought it was very, very funny. Because I could see, so an executive saying, "Oh, that's not my company," right? Being in denial, or on the other hand, saying, "Oh, this is a bunch of garbage. This is just silly. You weren't an executive, you wouldn't know." That kind of thing. But he thought it was funny. But the one comment he said was, "It's got a little bit of an edge to it." He says, "Sounds like you were angry." I says, "Well, maybe I was. It's kind of like therapy for me." So, but people definitely in offices, and interestingly enough, Keith, I only worked in the private sector. I mean, I did consulting for some of my clients were like universities or healthcare, but I really only worked in the private sector. I have people in healthcare and like in universities that have read it, and they say, yeah, it's just like the bureaucracy here is just like in the corporate world. So yeah, it's been well received among people in offices, and the little bit I've heard from executives, they find it funny too.
Oh, good. I love that. So I'm curious, Joel, as you got this book going, you kind of are doing your thing. What are you excited about in this particular season of your life?
Well, I'm excited about having the freedom to do what I wanted to do. This was always a a dream for me. I've always thought about this book for many years. So I'm actually kind of turn everything around. And now I'm like a humor writer. I had a book I wrote during COVID about marriage because I've been married 30 years and my wife hasn't thrown me out of the house yet. You
There you
know,
go.
a humor book called "Yes, Dear, a Husband's Guide to Marriage." So that's kind of what I'm excited about, being able to do my own thing, just with all of the pressures and demands of work. And that's any job. I mean, there's no way around it. Dysfunctional or functional company, you have to work hard to do anything. And so now I'm free. I don't have the distraction of those meetings, or all those emails, and all that, you know, all that stuff to actually, do the things that I've wanted to do. So I've got a lot of projects on the burner there.
That's awesome. I love to ask my guests this question.
Yeah.
As you think about your life so far and you kind of reflect back on what you've done and what you hope still accomplish, what do you want your legacy to be?
So my legacy would be that I broke the mold. I kind of broke the serious facade of the corporate world, because you go into the and you see all these people that they take themselves too seriously. They're very cautious in their language, and they speak in this corporate speak, as I call it in the book, and there's no creativity. Everything is like this cookie cutter mold way of doing things. I was always that guy that was the smart aleck in the meeting that always said the wrong thing at the wrong time. And you need more of that. You need more of that creative energy. And I just don't see that. So that's my legacy, kind of breaking the mold, getting people to laugh, and kind of making people be more creative in looking at their work situation.
That's a good legacy. I like that. As you wrap up our conversation, what key takeaways and insights you want our listeners to remember from our discussion today?
So the key takeaway, as I said in the beginning, Keith, is that um, what you should do is always be prepared for the inevitable in any job or in any company. Take advantage of any opportunities you have, even in dysfunctional companies. They will pay to train you. I have a whole thing in there about silly training, things that you're forced to do, right, that make no sense. You'll notice, Keith, there's a theme here. All these habits actually overlap. Poor employee treatment. That's because of something that didn't make sense, or they were in a meeting. So one of the things is always be take advantage of training. If your company offers training, or if they will pay for outside training, always beef up your skills in your field. The second thing I would say, always network. People sometimes they just get too complacent. They don't look ahead. They kind of have a tunnel vision about that job. That job may not be there tomorrow, and especially with all of the technical change going on, in AI right now, artificial intelligence, jobs are going to change. They're constantly changing. They come and they go. So always be out there networking. If you're a member of a professional society, go to their lunches, go to their dinners, meet people, network. Always have a business card. I'm amazed at some of these companies, they don't give business cards to people. Well, you may not be in sales, but this way someone has or now people put the contact information on apps on their phone. So the takeaway, as I said, training, networking, always be prepared, be loyal to your skills. I'm not saying to be disloyal to your company, but think of yourself first, and think of how be flexible and adaptable and ready for change and ready to move on at a moment's notice.
I love that.
That's
I
that's the
can see your
takeaway.
next book now, though. 7 Bad Habits of Cybersecurity.
Thanks for the suggestion, Keith.
Oh, wow. Joel, well, thanks so much. Hey, can you tell people again where they can find your book?
Yes.
Um,
So it's on Amazon. It's called The 7 Habits of Highly Dysfunctional Companies. I've also set up a dysfunctional company. It's called dysfunctionalcompany.com. That's my website. And you can buy that book. And actually, I wrote a cybersecurity book many years ago, which is a basic cybersecurity 101, which it still has some valuable information in it despite the change. And then about my other humor book about marriage. So dysfunctionalcompany.com is the way to find it. And again, as I say, it is on Amazon, available both in Kindle and in a paperback format. So
where can they find you on social media if they want to connect with you and hear some more of your great stories and jokes?
I'm still in the process of setting up my social media accounts. I'm in the process of setting up a TikTok and YouTube accounts right now. But if you go to dysfunctionalcompany.com, there's links to some social media that I have on there, and links to other things about me on there. That's probably the best way to find me. So it's a work in progress. So I've only been paroled out of the corporate prison for a year now, so I'm still adjusting to the outside world.
Oh, well, Joe, thanks so much for this and for the conversation and for the book you wrote, because I'm sure we could all use a laugh here and there, especially remembering our careers and in the workforce, to just kind of see the things that we may not have identified or written down as what was wrong. But you've helped us to kind of say, oh, yeah, that's why. And it wasn't always my fault.
Yeah, well, I have a thing in there about scapegoats.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you've got to have a scapegoat. So yeah, read the book. Read the book. It'll tell you about scapegoats and about, what happens to them, how they get tarred and feathered in public in the cafeteria. So
Right. Well, blessings on your book, Joel, and thanks.
thank
And
you.
when you write your next one, come back on again. We'll talk about that too as well.
Absolutely, Keith. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.